Life often unfolds in the most unexpected ways. Some stories grip our hearts not because they are perfect, but because they reveal the imperfect beauty of human resilience, compassion, and growth. Today, I'll share a tale that intertwines pain, prejudice, and redemption. A story of a boy named Tyler, a woman named Emma, and a community forever changed by a single summer afternoon. If you've ever witnessed injustice and felt powerless to intervene, or if you believe in the transformative power of love and education, this is for you. Don't forget to subscribe to this channel if this resonates with you, and share your thoughts below with an inspiring comment. Let's begin this journey together. Crystal Bay shimmered under the late summer sun, its waters mirroring the perfect blue sky. The community pool, a popular gathering spot, was buzzing with the sounds of children's laughter and the rhythmic splashes of swimmers. But what should have been a carefree day turned into an unforgettable moment for everyone present. Emma Spencer, a longtime resident of the neighborhood, had always prided herself on her vigilance. A woman in her mid-40s with neatly styled blonde hair and an air of authority. She considered herself the unofficial guardian of Crystal Bay's unwritten rules. As she sat on the edge of the pool, her sharp eyes scanning the area, they settled on a young black teenager, Tyler Jordan. Tyler, just 14 years old, was new to the neighborhood. His family had moved to Crystal Bay for a fresh start after his mother, Renee Jordan, was elected governor of the state, a historic milestone that brought both celebration and scrutiny. Tyler's easy smile and confident demeanor often masked the challenges he faced as a young black boy in a predominantly white community. As Tyler leaned back in a poolside chair, his headphones playing softly, Emma's gaze lingered. She began to wonder, who was this boy? Did he belong here? Her assumptions, born of prejudice, quickly morphed into a certainty that demanded action. She approached him, her tone firm. "Excuse me, young man," she began. "Can I see your pool membership card?" Tyler looked up, startled but polite. "I don't have it on me, ma'am, but my mom has it. I live here. My name's Tyler." Emma wasn't satisfied. "Well, Tyler," she said, her voice rising, "we have rules here. If you don't have a card, you shouldn't be here. I've been in this community for 25 years, and I've never seen you before." Her words drew the attention of other poolgoers. Whispers began to ripple through the crowd, but no one stepped forward to intervene. Tyler, though visibly uncomfortable, maintained his composure. "Ma'am, I'm not trying to break any rules. My family just moved in a few weeks ago. If you give me a moment, I can call my mom and she'll clear everything up." Emma's insistence grew. "I'm sorry, but I can't just take your word for it. Rules are rules. You need to leave." The tension was palpable. Some parents shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, unsure whether to speak up. Others pretended not to notice. The children continued playing, oblivious to the unfolding drama. Tyler stood, his calm demeanor a stark contrast to Emma's growing hostility. "I'm not causing any trouble," he said quietly, "but I won't leave just because you think I don't belong." Emma's face flushed with frustration. "It's not about what I think. It's about following the rules," she snapped. Then, a sleek silver SUV pulled into the parking lot. The doors opened, and out stepped a woman who exuded both confidence and authority, Renee Jordan, Tyler's mother. Renee, dressed in a tailored suit despite the heat, approached the pool with measured steps. Her presence immediately shifted the dynamic. The murmurs of the crowd ceased, replaced by a tense silence. "Is there a problem?" she asked, her voice steady but firm. Emma faltered, momentarily caught off guard. "This boy claims he lives here, but he doesn't have a membership card," she said, gesturing toward Tyler. Renee's gaze was unwavering. "This boy is my son," she replied, "and as a resident of this community, he has every right to be here." Emma hesitated, the weight of Renee's words sinking in. But before she could respond, Renee continued, "It seems we have a misunderstanding, but I can't help but wonder if this misunderstanding would have occurred if my son looked a little more like you." The crowd, previously silent, began to murmur again. Renee turned to address them, her voice resonating with authority. "We live in a world where implicit biases dictate our actions, often without us realizing it. But it's our responsibility to confront those biases, to question our assumptions, and to treat everyone with respect. She looked directly at Emma. I don't know you, and I won't pretend to understand your intentions. But I hope today serves as a reminder that appearances can be deceiving, and that respect should be given, not earned. Emma, visibly shaken, managed a quiet apology. I didn't mean to cause harm. I just didn't know. Not knowing is not an excuse, Renee replied gently but firmly. It's an opportunity to learn. As Renee placed a reassuring hand on Tyler's shoulder, the crowd seemed to collectively exhale. Some began to approach, offering apologies and words of support. Others stood in quiet reflection, perhaps considering their own assumptions. That day, Crystal Bay's idyllic image was shattered, but in its place emerged a new sense of awareness. Tyler's grace under pressure and Renee's decisive intervention left an indelible mark on everyone present. But this was just the beginning. The seeds of change had been sown, and the journey toward a more inclusive community was only starting. What happened next was nothing short of transformative. As Crystal Bay grappled with its collective conscience, new voices emerged, pushing for change. But could a single moment spark a lasting revolution in hearts and minds? Stay tuned as we explore the ripples of this pivotal event. As the warm sunlight began to wane over Crystal Bay, the tension at the pool was a stark contrast to the tranquil evening sky. Tyler Jordan, only 14 but carrying himself with the poise of someone much older, became the unlikely center of attention. His calm demeanor in the face of Emma's accusations was remarkable, but it wasn't born out of naivety. Tyler had grown accustomed to moments like this, moments where he had to navigate prejudice with a blend of patience and quiet strength. I appreciate everyone's concern, Tyler began, his voice steady but resolute as the murmurs of the gathered crowd continued. But I think it's important to say this: sometimes, standing your ground doesn't mean being confrontational. It means knowing your worth and not letting anyone take it from you. His words, spoken with the clarity of someone who had faced more than his fair share of challenges, resonated with those listening. A woman near the lifeguard stand adjusted her sunglasses, her expression unreadable. A father on the opposite side of the pool put down his magazine, his brow furrowing as if deep in thought. Despite the palpable tension, Tyler never raised his voice. Instead, he turned directly to Emma, his gaze unwavering but devoid of malice. I don't think you meant to hurt anyone today, he said. But intent doesn't erase impact. What happened here isn't just about a pool membership. It's about assuming that someone doesn't belong based on how they look. Emma's lips tightened, her defenses weakening under the weight of Tyler's words. For years, she had navigated her world through a lens shaped by her environment, her upbringing, and her unchallenged beliefs. Tyler's calm yet piercing observations were unsettling, not because they were harsh, but because they were true. Emma started, her voice faltering. I never thought about it that way. Tyler nodded slightly, his expression softening. That's the first step, he said simply. Thinking about it, questioning it. The crowd's attention shifted from Tyler to Emma, and then back again. The silence was heavy, but it wasn't the oppressive kind. It was the silence of people grappling with something uncomfortable yet necessary. Meanwhile, Tyler's mother, Renee Jordan, remained composed, her presence a steadying force. She didn't interrupt. She let her son speak for himself. But when he was finished, she stepped forward, her voice calm but commanding. My son has more grace in his little finger than many adults I've met in my lifetime, she began, her gaze sweeping across the assembled onlookers. But this grace shouldn't be mistaken for weakness. It's a strength that comes from understanding who he is and refusing to let others define him. Her words landed like stones in a still pond, sending ripples through the crowd. Some nodded in quiet agreement. Others shifted uncomfortably, as if suddenly aware of their own complicity in moments like these moments, when silence was as harmful as the actions being taken. Emma, to her credit, didn't retreat. Instead, she took a deep breath and said, I want to learn. I don't want to be the person who makes others feel like they don't belong. Renee acknowledged her with a small nod. It's a start, she replied. Learning requires listening, and listening requires humility. Today, we all have an opportunity to grow. What happened next was unexpected but profoundly moving. A young mother stepped forward, holding the hand of her son. "I'm sorry, Tyler," she said, her voice trembling, "for not saying something sooner. Your right silence allows these moments to happen." Another man, standing near the pool's edge, added, "We've all got blind spots. If this is going to be a community, a real community, we need to confront them together." It was as if a floodgate had been opened. Voices emerged from the crowd, some apologizing, others sharing their own stories of bias and exclusion. Tyler stood quietly, his expression a mix of gratitude and relief. Renee placed a hand on his shoulder, her pride in him evident. Emma, now visibly emotional, turned to Tyler and said, "Thank you for teaching me today. I'm sorry for what I did, and I promise to do better." Tyler extended his hand, and Emma took it, her grip firm, but her expression vulnerable. It was a handshake that symbolized more than just an apology. It was an acknowledgement of shared humanity. As the gathering began to disperse, the lifeguard stepped forward, addressing the group. "This pool is for everyone," she said firmly. "From now on, we're going to make sure that's clear, no exceptions." Renee looked at Tyler, her eyes full of both pride and a hint of sadness. "You handled that better than most adults would," she said quietly. Tyler shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. "You always said kindness is the most powerful thing we can give," he replied. "I guess it's finally sinking in." That evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the pool grew quiet, the events of the day lingered in the air. Conversations continued in homes around the neighborhood, some challenging, some enlightening. But one thing was clear. The Jordan family's presence in Crystal Bay had sparked something that couldn't be ignored. While the events at the pool were a turning point, they were far from the end of the story. The days that followed brought new challenges and unexpected alliances, as the community began to reckon with its past and envision a different future. But could this moment of unity truly last, or would old prejudices resurface? What unfolded next would test the strength of newfound convictions and reveal the true character of Crystal Bay. The days following the incident at the pool brought a tense stillness to Crystal Bay. For years, this serene neighborhood had prided itself on being a place of harmony. Yet beneath its surface, there were unspoken divisions, carefully masked by polite smiles and casual pleasantries. The confrontation between Tyler and Emma had exposed those cracks, leaving everyone to confront what they'd rather ignore. For Renee Jordan, the days were a whirlwind. Her dual role as governor and mother was demanding enough, but now she felt a personal obligation to her new community. The pool incident wasn't just about her son, it was about addressing a deeper, systemic issue. She knew this wasn't a battle won in a day. On a warm Saturday afternoon, a week after the confrontation, Renee stood at the entrance of the Crystal Bay Community Center. A meeting had been called, one she had initiated in partnership with the neighborhood association. The turnout was better than she'd anticipated. Families arrived in clusters, the weight of curiosity, guilt, or hope drawing them together. As Renee entered the hall, conversations hushed. Her presence was magnetic, not just because of her title, but because of her composure. She exuded a sense of purpose that demanded attention without uttering a word. Tyler followed close behind her, his usual calm demeanor intact, though he couldn't hide the nervous energy in his step. Renee approached the microphone at the front of the room, her gaze steady as it swept across the audience. "Good afternoon," she began, her voice calm but resolute. "Thank you all for coming today. I realize last week's events left us all with questions and perhaps, more importantly, with a sense of unease." Her words hung in the air, drawing nods from a few scattered faces. Emma was seated near the middle of the room, her posture rigid but her expression contrite. She had been one of the first to volunteer for this meeting, determined to prove that her apology at the pool wasn't just words. Renee continued, "What happened at the pool wasn't just an isolated incident. It was a reflection of something bigger, a mirror that forced us to see the biases we often prefer to keep hidden. Today, we're here to talk about that, not to assign blame, but to find solutions." The room was silent, save for the occasional shuffle of feet or the clearing of a throat. Renee's voice softened slightly as she said, "I know these conversations are uncomfortable. Growth always is. But if we're serious about building a community that truly values everyone, we must have them." A hand rose near the back of the room, a man in his early 40s, dressed in a polo shirt and khakis. "Governor Jordan," he began, his voice hesitant but sincere. "I've lived here for 10 years. I've always thought of this place as welcoming. But after last week, I realize I haven't done enough to make that true for everyone. What can we do practically to make this better?" Renee nodded, acknowledging the courage it took to speak up. "Thank you for your honesty," she replied. "The first step is education. We need to understand what implicit bias is and how it affects our interactions. I've invited a team of experts to help us with that today." She gestured toward a small group seated near the front, a diverse panel of educators and social workers specializing in community engagement. As they took the stage, Tyler couldn't help but notice how the audience leaned in, their initial hesitance melting into curiosity. The panel began by explaining the concept of implicit bias, using relatable examples that hit close to home. "It's not about labeling anyone as a bad person," one expert explained. "It's about recognizing that we all carry biases shaped by our experiences and culture. The key is to acknowledge them and make a conscious effort to challenge them." The audience was visibly engaged, some nodding in agreement, others scribbling notes on the pamphlets provided. But it wasn't until the panel shared stories, personal anecdotes, and real-life examples that the message truly hit home. One panelist, a middle-aged man named Marcus, recounted a story from his own youth. "When I was Tyler's age," he began, "I was followed around a grocery store because the owner assumed I was going to steal something. I wasn't angry, I was humiliated. That experience stayed with me, and it shaped how I interact with others today." Tyler felt a lump in his throat as Marcus spoke. His story mirrored so many of his own experiences, moments he rarely shared but always carried with him. Looking around, he saw similar emotions reflected in the faces of others, including Emma, whose eyes glistened with unshed tears. As the session progressed, the conversation turned to actionable steps. The experts proposed initiatives like inclusive community events, diversity workshops, and creating a neighborhood council to address issues of bias and inequality. Emma was the first to volunteer for the council. "I want to be part of the solution," she said, her voice trembling but determined. "I've been here for 25 years, but I see now how much I still have to learn, and I'm willing to do the work." Her declaration was met with a smattering of applause, but the most meaningful response came from Tyler, who gave her a small, encouraging nod. It was a moment of quiet reconciliation, proof that change, however slow, was possible. By the end of the meeting, the atmosphere in the room had shifted. What began as a gathering steeped in tension had transformed into a space of hope and possibility. As people filed out, many stopped to thank Renee and Tyler personally, expressing their commitment to being better neighbors. Renee watched the crowd disperse, a faint smile playing on her lips. "This is just the beginning," she said quietly to Tyler. He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "It's a good start, though." That night, as the lights in the community center dimmed, Crystal Bay felt different. The neighborhood had taken its first steps toward healing, but the journey ahead would require continued effort, honesty, and the willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. The seeds of change had been planted, but seeds need nurturing to grow. In the days to come, Crystal Bay would face challenges that tested its newfound unity. Could the community sustain its commitment to change, or would the weight of old habits and fears pull it back into division? The answers would emerge in ways no one could have predicted. The transformation in Crystal Bay, though promising, was anything but linear. Change rarely arrives as a sweeping tide. Instead, it ebbs and flows, meeting resistance and acceptance in uneven measures. The community had taken its first steps toward inclusivity, but the path forward would demand perseverance and courage. The test came sooner than anyone anticipated. A month after the community meeting, the annual Crystal Bay Harvest Festival was approaching, a cherished tradition where families gathered to celebrate the season with music, food, and games. This year, for the first time, The neighborhood council had decided to make the festival explicitly inclusive, featuring performances and vendors that reflected the diversity of the town's evolving population. The decision, while welcomed by many, was met with whispers of dissent among others. "Why change what's already good?" some murmured. "Isn't this just creating division where there wasn't any?" These voices were quieter than before, but their presence lingered like a shadow over the preparations. Emma, now an active member of the council, found herself at the center of this brewing tension. She had become a vocal advocate for change, using her newfound awareness to challenge assumptions and encourage empathy. Yet, she couldn't ignore the subtle resistance from neighbors she once considered friends. One afternoon, as Emma helped set up booths for the festival, she overheard a heated exchange. A group of parents, gathered near the main stage, were discussing the lineup of performers, which included a local gospel choir, a mariachi band, and a spoken word artist. "This isn't what the Harvest Festival is about," one man said, his voice low but agitated. "It's supposed to be about tradition, not some agenda." Emma hesitated for a moment, then approached the group, her heart pounding but her resolve firm. "The Harvest Festival has always been about bringing people together," she said calmly. "Expanding what we celebrate doesn't take away from the tradition, it enriches it." The man turned to face her, his expression skeptical. "That's easy for you to say. You're the one pushing for all these changes." Emma held his gaze. "I'm pushing for growth," she replied. "For a community where everyone feels welcome, not just the ones who've been here the longest." The tension hung in the air, but before the man could respond, another voice chimed in. "She's right," said Marcus, the panelist from the community meeting, who had been walking by. "Tradition isn't about exclusion. It's about creating a sense of belonging for everyone." The man muttered something under his breath and walked away, but not before Emma caught the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. It wasn't victory, but it was a start. The festival day arrived with clear skies and a crisp breeze that carried the scent of roasted corn and cinnamon. The town square buzzed with energy as families wandered between booths, sampling food and admiring local crafts. Children laughed as they darted through hay mazes, their joy unclouded by the tensions that lingered among the adults. Tyler was there, of course, helping his mother at a booth promoting literacy programs. He had been reluctant to attend at first, wary of stepping into the spotlight again after the pool incident. But Renee had encouraged him, reminding him that his presence was a quiet but powerful statement. As the festival unfolded, the new elements integrated seamlessly with the old. The gospel choir's harmonies brought tears to the eyes of even the most skeptical attendees, while the mariachi band had children and parents alike dancing in the square. Yet, the spoken word performance was the turning point. The artist, a young woman named Aisha, took the stage with a quiet confidence that commanded attention. Her poem, an eloquent exploration of identity and belonging, was a mirror held up to the community. She spoke of the pain of exclusion, the courage to reclaim space, and the beauty of finding common ground despite differences. Her words resonated deeply, drawing a standing ovation that seemed to ripple through the crowd like a wave. Tyler, watching from the sidelines, felt a lump rise in his throat. For the first time, he saw a glimpse of what his mother had been working toward, not just tolerance, but true understanding. As the festival drew to a close, a spontaneous moment unfolded. Emma, standing near the stage, noticed a small group of attendees hesitating at the edge of the crowd. Among them was the man who had confronted her earlier in the week. She walked over, her heart pounding, and offered a simple gesture, an outstretched hand. "Thank you for coming," she said, her voice steady but warm. The man hesitated, then shook her hand. "I didn't agree with everything today," he admitted, his tone gruff, "but I see why it matters to you." Emma smiled, the first genuine smile she'd given him in years. "That's all I ask that you see." Later that evening, as the last of the booths were dismantled and the square emptied, Renee and Tyler walked home together under the glow of streetlights. Tyler was quiet, his hands in his pockets, until he finally said, "It felt different today. Better." Renee looked at him, her expression thoughtful. "It's a start," she said, "but there's more to do. There always is." As they reached their front door, Tyler paused. "Do you think people can really change?" Renee placed a hand on his shoulder, her gaze steady. "I think people are capable of incredible change," she replied, "but only if they're willing to listen to themselves and to others. That's the hard part." Tyler nodded, his mother's words settling into his heart like seeds waiting to grow. That night, as he lay awake in bed, he thought of Aisha's poem, of the gospel choir's voices, and of the small but meaningful connections formed that day. He didn't have all the answers, but he felt a flicker of hope, a belief that even in the face of resistance, change was possible. The Harvest Festival marked a turning point, but it was far from the end of Crystal Bay's journey. As the community continued to evolve, unexpected challenges arose, forcing its residents to confront deeper truths about themselves and their shared future. Would they rise to meet these challenges, or would the weight of old habits pull them back into division? What came next would test the resilience of every person in Crystal Bay. The aftermath of the Harvest Festival left a quiet hum of hope lingering in Crystal Bay. It was subtle, almost imperceptible to those who weren't paying attention. But for the people who had been part of the changes, the ones who had spoken, listened, and opened their hearts, it was impossible to ignore. Still, hope alone wasn't enough. Progress required action, and the weeks that followed brought both challenges and triumphs. Emma, who had once embodied the very biases the community sought to unlearn, threw herself into the neighborhood council's work with a fervor that surprised even herself. She organized workshops, facilitated conversations, and personally reached out to those who had expressed doubts about the new direction Crystal Bay was taking. At first, many resisted her efforts, their skepticism thinly veiled behind polite nods or curt responses. But Emma persisted, armed with patience and a deep-seated resolve to prove that she, too, was capable of growth. One chilly evening, she hosted a book club in her home, inviting neighbors to discuss a memoir by a prominent civil rights activist. To her relief, a handful of attendees arrived, including Marcus and Aisha, who had become integral voices in the community's transformation. The discussion started cautiously, but as the evening wore on, the atmosphere softened. By the time the last guest left, Emma stood in her doorway, her heart swelling with quiet pride. It wasn't the largest gathering, nor the most groundbreaking conversation, but it was progress, one small step toward healing the fractures she had once contributed to. Meanwhile, Tyler's story began to ripple beyond Crystal Bay. His poise during the pool incident and his willingness to forgive became an inspiration for others. Spreading through social media posts and local news features, school administrators invited him to speak to students about resilience and empathy, while youth groups sought his guidance on addressing prejudice in their own lives. Tyler approached these opportunities with a mixture of humility and determination, careful not to let the attention overshadow the message he wanted to share. One afternoon, as Tyler prepared to speak at a neighboring town's community center, he turned to his mother. "Why do you think people care so much about what happened at the pool?" he asked, his voice tinged with uncertainty. Renee smiled gently. "Because you showed them something they don't see often enough," she replied. "You showed them grace in the face of adversity. That's a powerful thing, Tyler. It reminds people of what they're capable of, even when the world feels divided." Tyler nodded, her words settling into his chest like a steady drumbeat. As he stepped onto the stage, the applause from the audience was warm, but not overwhelming, just the way he preferred it. He spoke with the same quiet conviction that had carried him through the incident, weaving his story with universal truths about kindness, understanding, and the courage to stand firm in one's values. Back in Crystal Bay, the neighborhood council's efforts began to bear fruit. The diversity workshops, once met with tepid enthusiasm, became increasingly popular as word spread about their thought-provoking content and welcoming atmosphere. Local schools introduced new curriculum units focused on cultural awareness and inclusion, inspired by the conversations that had emerged in the wake of the pool incident. Even the town's businesses got involved, with several hosting events that celebrated the community's growing diversity. But not everyone embraced the changes. Small pockets of resistance lingered, their voices quieter than before. but no less insistent. Why fix what wasn't broken? They muttered in private gatherings. This isn't the Crystal Bay we grew up in. Renee knew these sentiments couldn't be ignored. As governor, she had faced resistance on far greater scales, but there was something uniquely personal about the challenges in Crystal Bay. This was her home now, the place she had chosen to raise her son. And so, she continued to lead by example, attending every council meeting she could, offering her insights without overshadowing the voices of others. It was during one such meeting that a breakthrough occurred. A man named Frank, who had lived in Crystal Bay for over 30 years and had been a vocal critic of the changes, stood up to speak. His presence alone was a surprise. He had avoided previous meetings, claiming they were a waste of time. "I've been thinking a lot about what's been happening here," Frank began, his voice gruff but steady. "I won't pretend I agreed with everything at first. Heck, I didn't agree with most of it. But my granddaughter came home from school last week talking about this project she's working on. She said it's about understanding different cultures and what makes each one special. And you know what? She's excited about it. She's learning things I never thought to teach her." Frank paused, his gaze sweeping across the room. "Maybe it's time for me to learn too," he said, his tone softening. "Maybe it's time for all of us." The room erupted into applause, not because Frank's words were revolutionary, but because they represented a shift, a willingness to move forward together. As the months passed, the changes in Crystal Bay became more deeply rooted. The community began to feel like a patchwork quilt. Its strength derived from the unique threads that made it whole. Tyler continued to thrive, his resilience serving as a beacon for others. Emma found purpose in her advocacy, her journey of self-reflection inspiring those around her to embark on their own. And Renee, ever the steady force, watched with quiet pride as the town she now called home blossomed into something she had always believed it could be. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon and the neighborhood glowed with the warmth of porch lights and laughter, Tyler and Renee sat on their front steps, watching the world settle into dusk. "Do you think we've made a difference?" Tyler asked, his voice thoughtful. Renee placed an arm around his shoulders, her gaze fixed on the vibrant tapestry of life unfolding around them. "I think we've planted seeds," she said, "and with enough care, they'll grow into something beautiful." Tyler nodded, a small smile playing on his lips. For the first time, he felt not just hope, but certainty that even in the face of resistance, love and understanding could transform the most unlikely of places. Crystal Bay had come a long way, but true transformation isn't a destination, it's an ongoing journey. As the community continued to grow, new challenges emerged, testing their commitment to the values they had embraced. Would they rise to meet these challenges, or falter under the weight of old habits and fears? What unfolded next would reveal the resilience of their shared humanity. Crystal Bay's journey of transformation wasn't just written in anecdotes and heartfelt moments. It was etched into measurable changes that echoed far beyond its borders. Numbers began to tell the story that words couldn't fully capture. These figures, simple yet profound, painted a picture of progress and the challenges that still lay ahead. 14, Tyler Jordan's age, had become a symbol of both vulnerability and resilience. At an age when most boys were preoccupied with fitting in and finding their place, Tyler had become a catalyst for change in his community. His story resonated far beyond Crystal Bay, reaching classrooms, town halls, and online forums. Educators used his grace under pressure as a case study in empathy and resilience. Social workers cited his experience as a reason to invest in community-building programs for young people. His age became more than a number. It became a rallying cry for those who believed in the power of youth to lead transformative change. 25. Emma. Spencer's years as a Crystal Bay resident reflected the slow entrenchment of biases that so often go unexamined. For years, she had lived in the same neighborhood, passed by the same people, and shared the same spaces. Yet her assumptions had blinded her to the richness of her own community. After the pool incident, Emma took a hard look at her decades in Crystal Bay. She joined book clubs that focused on stories of diverse perspectives, participated in workshops about implicit bias, and even began mentoring new council members to help them avoid the mistakes she once made. 25 years of unawareness had turned into a determined effort to ensure the next 25 were different. 5. It took just 5 minutes for Governor Renee Jordan's calm yet authoritative intervention at the pool to change the trajectory of a community. Those few minutes, though brief, set in motion a chain of events that reshaped Crystal Bay's collective identity. During speaking engagements across the state, Renee often referenced the power of those moments, emphasizing how quick, decisive action rooted in compassion and justice could lead to lasting change. The simplicity of those 5 minutes became a profound reminder that every action, no matter how small, could ripple outward in unexpected and powerful ways. As these numbers gained symbolic weight, Crystal Bay also began to see concrete improvements. School enrollment in diversity-focused electives doubled in the year following the pool incident, and attendance at neighborhood council meetings soared by nearly 70%. These statistics weren't just numbers on a page, they represented lives touched, minds opened, and a community moving toward a more inclusive future. Local businesses also felt the impact. Restaurants and shops that embraced the growing diversity of Crystal Bay reported higher customer satisfaction and increased patronage. A small bookstore on Main Street started a Community Voices series, featuring authors and speakers from various backgrounds. The series quickly became one of the store's most popular events, drawing crowds from neighboring towns. Even the Crystal Bay pool underwent a transformation, both physically and culturally. New policies were implemented to ensure that everyone felt welcome, including mandatory staff training on diversity and inclusion. A mural was commissioned for the pool's entrance, depicting a vibrant scene of community unity. Tyler's mother, Renee, worked with local artists to ensure the mural reflected the town's evolving identity. And when it was unveiled, the event drew hundreds of residents, all eager to celebrate this new chapter. However, progress wasn't without its challenges. As Crystal Bay gained recognition for its transformation, it attracted both praise and criticism. Articles about the town appeared in national newspapers and online platforms, with some lauding its efforts as a model for other communities and others dismissing them as performative gestures. Residents found themselves navigating the fine line between celebrating their achievements and acknowledging the work still to be done. The neighborhood council, led in part by Emma and Marcus, worked tirelessly to address these concerns. They initiated a series of listening circles, where residents could voice their thoughts and experiences without fear of judgment. These circles became a cornerstone of the community's ongoing efforts, providing a space for difficult but necessary conversations. One of the most impactful moments occurred during a listening circle when a young man named Caleb spoke about his struggles growing up in Crystal Bay as one of the few biracial children in the neighborhood. "I spent years feeling like I didn't belong anywhere," he admitted, his voice trembling. "But seeing what's happening now, it gives me hope. It makes me believe that the next kid like me won't have to feel that way." Caleb's words struck a chord with everyone in the room. Tyler, seated nearby, gave him an encouraging nod, their unspoken connection serving as a reminder of the importance of shared stories in fostering empathy and understanding. Beyond the emotional impact, the transformation of Crystal Bay also inspired systemic changes. Local schools partnered with regional organizations to implement mentorship programs for students from underrepresented backgrounds. Town officials passed ordinances to support affordable housing initiatives, ensuring that Crystal Bay remained accessible to families of all income levels. Despite these strides, challenges persisted. Some residents clung to old habits and biases, resisting the changes with subtle acts of defiance. Complaints about noise during community events or concerns over property values occasionally surfaced, serving as reminders that progress is rarely linear. But for every step back, there were 2 steps forward. When a group of residents organized a neighborhood cleanup day, they were joined by people who had once been vocal critics of the council's efforts. When a local diner hosted a fundraiser for youth programs, the event drew a record-breaking crowd, including families who had previously kept to themselves. Crystal Bay's transformation was far from complete. but it was undeniable. The numbers told a story of progress, but it was the people Emma, Tyler, Caleb, Renee, and countless others who gave those numbers meaning. They were proof that change, while difficult and messy, was possible when communities came together with open hearts and minds. Crystal Bay's journey had been defined by growth, but new challenges loomed on the horizon. As the community navigated the complexities of its transformation, the question remained: could they sustain their progress in the face of mounting pressures, or would the cracks of resistance widen once more? What happened next would test not just their resolve, but their capacity for true unity. As Crystal Bay continued to evolve, its story began to ripple outward, touching lives far beyond its borders. What had started as a singular confrontation at the community pool transformed into a movement, one that resonated with people grappling with similar struggles in their own towns and neighborhoods. News of Crystal Bay's journey reached state and national platforms, sparking both admiration and introspection in places that had never heard of the small, unassuming town. The first major ripple came in the form of invitations. Tyler and Renee were asked to speak at community forums, educational panels, and civic gatherings. At first, Tyler was reluctant, still grappling with the weight of his sudden role as a symbol of resilience. "I'm just a kid," he told his mother one evening. "I don't have all the answers." Renee, ever the steady force in his life, replied with a gentle smile. "No one does, Tyler, but what you have is a story. And stories have the power to change hearts and minds in ways that facts and arguments never can." So Tyler began sharing his story, weaving it with lessons about courage, empathy, and the strength found in standing firm without losing compassion. At one event, a teacher approached him afterward, tears in her eyes. "Your story reminded me why I became an educator," she said. "To teach kids not just how to learn, but how to lead." The ripple effect extended to institutions that once seemed untouched by Crystal Bay's struggles. A nearby town, inspired by the changes in the small community, launched its own diversity and inclusion initiative, addressing long-standing issues of inequality in their schools and workplaces. Organizations began incorporating Tyler's story into training programs, using it as a case study for resilience and the importance of allyship. But the ripples weren't just external. Within Crystal Bay, the momentum continued to build. The community took steps to solidify the changes they had begun. The neighborhood council expanded its scope, partnering with local businesses, schools, and civic organizations to implement lasting reforms. One of the most impactful initiatives was the Crystal Bay Futures Program, a mentorship initiative designed to support youth from underrepresented backgrounds. Marcus, now a central figure in the council, took the lead in organizing the program. Drawing on his own experiences, he paired young people with mentors who could guide them not only academically but personally. Tyler became one of the program's first participants, though his role quickly evolved from mentee to mentor. One of his mentees, a shy boy named Luis, reminded Tyler of himself before the pool incident: quiet, observant, and full of untapped potential. Over the weeks and months, Tyler helped Luis find his voice, encouraging him to share his own story during a Futures Program event. "I never thought my voice mattered," Luis admitted during his speech, his hands trembling as he held the microphone. "But Tyler showed me that it does, and if my voice matters, maybe yours does too." The applause that followed was thunderous, and as Tyler watched from the sidelines, he felt a surge of pride, not for himself, but for the community they were building together. Even as these successes mounted, the road was not without obstacles. The backlash that had initially simmered in pockets of the community occasionally flared up, particularly among those who felt the changes were moving too fast or disrupting long-standing traditions. Social media became a battleground, with debates over Crystal Bay's transformation playing out in comment sections and posts. One particularly heated moment came when a local newspaper published an op-ed criticizing the neighborhood council's efforts as performative and overly idealistic. The article argued that the changes, while well-intentioned, failed to address the deeper systemic issues facing the town. Emma, now one of the council's most vocal members, took the criticism personally. "What if they're right?" She asked Marcus during a late-night meeting. What if all of this is just surface level? Marcus, ever the pragmatist, leaned back in his chair. Change doesn't happen all at once, Emma. It's messy, it's slow, and it's imperfect. But that doesn't mean it's not worth fighting for. The council responded to the criticism not with defensiveness, but with action. They organized a town hall, inviting residents to share their concerns and ideas. The event, held in the same community center where Renee had first addressed the pool incident, was packed with attendees. During the meeting, a young woman named Clara stood to speak. "I've lived here my whole life," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion in her eyes. "And for most of it, I felt invisible. But these changes, they've given me hope. Not just for myself, but for my kids. I don't care if it's messy or imperfect. It's better than doing nothing." Her words drew applause and served as a reminder that while criticism could sting, it was no match for the collective will of a community determined to grow. As Crystal Bay's story continued to ripple outward, it began to take on a life of its own. Schools adopted it as part of their curriculum, teaching students about the power of empathy and the importance of standing up for what's right. Civic leaders used it as a blueprint for addressing prejudice and fostering inclusivity in their own towns. But perhaps the most profound ripple was the impact on the next generation. Children who had watched the events at the pool unfold, who had seen their parents grapple with difficult truths and embrace change, began to carry those lessons forward. They spoke with more confidence, interacted with more empathy, and saw the world not as a collection of divisions, but as a tapestry of connections waiting to be strengthened. Tyler, reflecting on these ripples one quiet evening, turned to his mother. "Do you think we'll ever stop needing to have these conversations?" he asked. Renee smiled, her eyes full of the wisdom that came from years of navigating life's complexities. "I hope not," she said, "because the day we stop talking about these things is the day we stop growing. And growth is what makes life worth living." As the evening settled over Crystal Bay, its streets aglow with the soft warmth of porch lights and laughter, the town stood as a testament to the power of small actions, shared stories, and unwavering hope. Crystal Bay's transformation had inspired countless communities, but the journey was far from over. As new challenges emerged, the question lingered: could the momentum they had built withstand the pressures of time, complacency, and external scrutiny? What came next would reveal whether their progress was a fleeting ripple or a lasting wave of change. Tyler Jordan's life had become a tapestry woven from the threads of resilience, empathy, and an unshakable sense of purpose. His story, once confined to the quiet boundaries of Crystal Bay, had grown into a beacon of inspiration for people far and wide. Yet, for all the recognition he received, Tyler remained grounded. He still carried his backpack to school, still studied for exams, and still spent quiet evenings with his mother, sharing the small details of their days. But beneath the surface, something profound was shifting. Tyler was becoming a symbol of what could happen when courage met compassion. At school, Tyler's presence began to carry a different weight. His peers, once indifferent to his quiet demeanor, now sought him out not just for friendship, but for advice. It started with small things: a classmate asking how to handle a difficult teacher, another seeking guidance on how to confront a bully. Tyler didn't always have the answers, but he listened, offering thoughtful responses that reflected his growing understanding of the world. One day, during a student council meeting, a younger student named Mia approached him. She was nervous, her hands clutching the straps of her backpack, as though they were the only things keeping her grounded. "Tyler," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "how do you stay calm when people don't treat you right?" Tyler paused, considering her question. "It's not always easy," he admitted, "but I remind myself that how someone treats me says more about them than it does about me. Staying calm doesn't mean ignoring the problem. It means showing them that their behavior doesn't define who you are." Mia nodded, her shoulders relaxing slightly. "Thank you," she said softly, before walking away. Tyler watched her go, his heart swelling with a quiet pride. It wasn't the first time he'd been asked such a question, and it wouldn't be the last. But each interaction reminded him of the impact one voice could have. Beyond the school walls, Tyler's influence extended into the community. Through the Crystal Bay Futures program, he worked closely with Louise and other mentees, helping them navigate challenges both big and small. He saw himself in these young people, their fears, their hopes, their quiet determination to find their place in the world. And as he watched them grow, he found himself growing too, learning as much from them as they did from him. Louise, in particular, blossomed under Tyler's guidance. Once shy and hesitant, he began to speak up in class, to volunteer for leadership roles, to embrace the parts of himself he had once tried to hide. During a Futures program event, Louise delivered a speech that left the room in awe. "When I met Tyler," he began, his voice steady, "I didn't think I could make a difference. I thought my voice didn't matter, but he showed me that even the smallest actions can have the biggest impact. And now, I want to show others the same." The applause was deafening, but what struck Tyler most was the look on Luce's face, a look of pride, confidence, and unshakable belief in himself. It was a moment that cemented Tyler's own sense of purpose, a reminder that his journey wasn't just about his own growth, but about lifting others up along the way. As Tyler's story spread, it began to take on a life of its own. Local organizations used it as a foundation for workshops on empathy and inclusion, while educators wove it into lessons about courage and resilience. But perhaps the most significant impact was the conversations it sparked within families. Parents who had once dismissed discussions of bias and equality as unnecessary found themselves listening to their children with newfound openness. Dinner tables became spaces for dialogue, living rooms transformed into classrooms, and the ripple effect continued to grow. Even those who had initially resisted Crystal Bay's changes began to soften. Frank, the longtime resident who had once been critical of the neighborhood council's efforts, became one of Tyler's most vocal supporters. "That boy's got more wisdom than most grown men I know," he said during a town hall meeting, his gruff tone laced with admiration. "If he can face the world with that kind of grace, the least we can do is follow his lead." But for all the praise and recognition, Tyler never lost sight of what mattered most: the relationships he had built and the lessons he had learned. He continued to spend time with his mother, their bond growing stronger with each passing day. Renee, too, found herself inspired by her son's journey, using his story as a touchstone in her work as governor. One evening, as they sat on the porch, Renee turned to Tyler, her expression thoughtful. "Do you ever feel overwhelmed by all of this?" she asked gently. Tyler considered her question for a moment before replying. "Sometimes," he admitted, "but then I remember why I'm doing it. It's not about being perfect or having all the answers. It's about trying to make things better, even if it's just a little bit at a time." Renee smiled, her heart swelling with pride. "You're doing more than that, Tyler. You're showing people what's possible when we lead with love and understanding." As the evening settled into night, Tyler reflected on her words. He didn't see himself as a hero or a symbol. He was just a boy trying to do the right thing. But in doing so, he had become a light for others, a reminder that even in the face of adversity, hope could flourish. Tyler's journey had touched countless lives, but the challenges facing Crystal Bay were far from over. As new conflicts arose, the community would be forced to confront its deepest fears and assumptions. Could the bonds they had forged withstand the weight of these challenges, or would the cracks of division threaten to undo their progress? What came next would test their resilience and reveal the true strength of their unity. The unity Crystal Bay had fought so hard to cultivate was about to face its greatest test. A proposed infrastructure project, a new bypass, highway designed to connect nearby cities, threatened to cut through a section of the neighborhood. On paper, the project seemed like progress: shorter commute times, increased accessibility, and economic growth. But the reality was far more complex. The highway would displace several homes, most of them belonging to families who had lived in the area for generations. The announcement landed like a thunderclap, dividing the community. Some residents saw the project as an opportunity, a sign that Crystal Bay was moving into the future. Others viewed it as an existential threat, an erasure of the very progress they had made in building an inclusive and tightly knit neighborhood. For a community still finding its footing, the stakes felt impossibly high. The first community meeting about the bypass was packed, the room buzzing with tension. Tyler sat near the back with his mother, his face a mixture of concern and curiosity. He had never seen the neighborhood this divided. People who had once worked together to foster understanding now stood on opposite sides of the issue, their voices sharp with frustration. Frank, the older resident who had slowly become a staunch supporter of change, was one of the first to speak. "This highway will destroy everything we've built," he said, his tone firm but measured. "It's not just a road, it's a wall. It's going to split this neighborhood in half and push people out who've lived here longer than most of us." On the other side of the room, a business owner named Sharon countered. "I understand the concerns," she began, her voice calm but resolute. "But this highway could bring new customers to our stores, create jobs, and attract more families to Crystal Bay. Isn't that worth considering?" As the debate unfolded, the room grew increasingly heated. Tyler watched as the voices that had once united to address bias and inclusion now turned inward, their divisions threatening to unravel everything they had worked so hard to achieve. He glanced at his mother, who gave him a small, reassuring nod. It was the kind of nod that said, "You know what to do." When there was a brief lull in the conversation, Tyler stood, his heart pounding. "I think we're forgetting something important," he began, his voice carrying just enough strength to silence the murmurs. "This isn't just about a highway or about progress. It's about people. The same people who came together to make this community stronger after the pool incident. The same people who supported each other through change. We can't let this divide us." The room fell silent as Tyler continued. "I know this is hard, but we've faced hard things before, and we got through them by listening to each other and working together. If we let this highway tear us apart, then we're letting it win before it's even built." Frank was the first to nod, his expression softening. "The boy's got a point," he said gruffly. "We can't go back to the way things were." The discussion that followed was still passionate, but the anger had given way to a more collaborative tone. Ideas began to flow: compromises, alternative routes, community impact studies. Renee, who had been quietly observing from the back, stepped forward to offer her expertise. "This project doesn't have to be all or nothing," she said. "There's room for negotiation, but we need to approach this as a united front if we're going to protect what matters most." Over the following weeks, the neighborhood rallied. They organized town halls, gathered petitions, and even brought in urban planning experts to explore alternative solutions. Tyler played a quiet but vital role, bridging the gap between older residents like Frank and younger voices like Louise and Mia. His ability to listen without judgment and to find common ground became a guiding force for the community. The turning point came during a meeting with the developers and local officials. Crystal Bay's residents showed up in force, their arguments backed by data, personal stories, and a clear vision for the future they wanted to protect. Renee spoke with her trademark blend of authority and empathy, while Tyler shared a story about Louise and his family, whose home was directly in the proposed highway's path. "This isn't just about a house," Tyler said, his voice steady but emotional. "It's about a family. It's about memories, about a place where people feel safe and loved. You can't put a price on that." By the end of the meeting, even the developers seemed moved. They agreed to revisit the plans, working closely with the community to minimize displacement and preserve Crystal Bay's unique character. It wasn't a perfect solution, but it was a victory, a testament to what could be achieved when people stood together. The experience left a lasting impact on the neighborhood. The bypass project became a rallying point, strengthening the bonds that had been tested by the debate. People who had once found themselves at odds rediscovered their shared values, their common dreams. Emma, who had been instrumental in organizing the efforts, reflected on the journey during a council meeting. "We started this work because we wanted to create a community where everyone felt like they belonged," she said. "What we've learned is that belonging isn't just about being invited to the table. It's about working together to build the table in the first place." As the months passed, Crystal Bay continued to grow, not just in population, but in spirit. The bypass, when it was finally built, was a symbol not of division, but of resilience, a reminder that even the most daunting challenges could be overcome with unity and determination. One evening, as the sun set over the neighborhood, Tyler and Renee sat on their porch, watching the world slow down. "Do you think we'll ever run out of things to fight for?" Tyler asked, his tone half serious, half wistful. Renee chuckled softly, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "I hope not," she said, "because every fight, every challenge is an opportunity to grow. And growing, that's what makes life worth living." Tyler smiled, her words settling into his heart like a quiet truth. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. Whatever came next, Crystal Bay would face it together. Crystal Bay had proven its resilience, but new challenges loomed on the horizon. As the community embraced its evolving identity, the question remained, could they sustain their hard-earned unity? Or would the pressures of the outside world threaten to unravel their progress? What came next would define not just the neighborhood, but the legacy they hoped to leave behind. Crystal Bay was no longer just a neighborhood. It had become a symbol of what was possible when a community embraced change, however uncomfortable or daunting it might seem. The Bypass Project, which had once threatened to tear the town apart, now stood as a testament to compromise and collective will. The final design curved gently around the most vulnerable homes, preserving the character of the community while allowing for progress. To commemorate this achievement, the town erected a small park near the bypass entrance, complete with a plaque that read, "Built with unity for the future." The park quickly became a gathering place, a spot where children played while parents chatted on benches under the shade of old oak trees. On any given day, you could find Louise helping younger kids navigate the jungle gym, Mia practicing her speech for the school debate team, or Frank teaching a group of teens how to fly kites the way he'd done as a boy. For Tyler, the park was more than just a place to relax. It was a reflection of the journey the neighborhood had taken. He often sat on a bench there, his sketchbook open as he doodled or jotted down thoughts. One evening, as he watched the sunset paint the sky in hues of gold and pink, a young boy approached him. "Are you the Tyler Jordan?" the boy asked, his wide eyes filled with awe. Tyler laughed softly. "I guess that depends. Who's asking?" "My teacher told us about you," the boy said, sitting beside him. "She said you helped save Crystal Bay." Tyler smiled, shaking his head modestly. "It wasn't just me," he said. "It was all of us. A lot of people worked hard to make this place what it is today." The boy tilted his head, considering this. "Do you think I can help too?" "Of course," Tyler replied without hesitation. "Helping isn't about being a certain age or having a big title. It's about showing up and doing what you can, wherever you are." The boy grinned, and they sat together in companionable silence as the last rays of sunlight faded. Meanwhile, Renee continued her work as governor, drawing inspiration from the lessons Crystal Bay had taught her. In speeches and policy meetings, she often referenced the small community, using its story as a blueprint for addressing broader issues. Her efforts led to statewide initiatives aimed at fostering inclusivity, supporting underrepresented communities, and promoting civic engagement. One of her proudest moments came when she returned to Crystal Bay to dedicate the park's opening ceremony. The entire neighborhood turned out for the event, their faces glowing with pride and anticipation. Renee stood on the small stage, Tyler by her side, and addressed the crowd with the warmth and conviction that had always defined her leadership. "This park isn't just a place to play," she said, her voice carrying over the hushed crowd. "It's a reminder of what we've accomplished together. It's a symbol of resilience, of unity, and of hope. But more than that, it's a challenge to keep building, to keep growing, and to never stop striving for the kind of community we want to leave for the next generation." The applause was thunderous, but the moment that stayed with Renee came after the ceremony, when Frank approached her with tears in his eyes. "You and your boy changed everything," he said gruffly. "This place, these people, we're better because of you." Renee placed a hand on his shoulder, her gaze steady. "We're better because of each other, Frank. That's the only way change happens." As the years went on, Crystal Bay's story became a cornerstone of its identity. The town was featured in documentaries, studied in classrooms, and celebrated in conferences about community building and social progress. But for the residents, the true legacy was less about the recognition and more about the quiet, everyday moments that reflected how far they had come. Emma continued her work on the council, mentoring new members and ensuring that the lessons of the past weren't forgotten. Marcus expanded the Futures program, creating chapters in neighboring towns and cities. Luis grew into a confident young leader, following in Tyler's footsteps and inspiring others to find their voices. And Tyler? He remained at the heart of it all, not as a symbol or a leader, but simply as himself, a young man who had chosen to stand firm in the face of adversity and, in doing so, had sparked a wave of change that no one could have anticipated. One day, years later, Tyler returned to the park, now a young adult preparing to leave for college. He sat on the same bench where he'd spoken with the young boy years before, his heart full of gratitude and anticipation. As he watched a group of children chase each other across the grass, he felt a deep sense of peace. Renee joined him, carrying 2 cups of hot cocoa. She handed him one and sat beside him, her gaze thoughtful as she surveyed the bustling park. "Do you ever think about what's next?" Tyler asked, his voice quiet. "All the time," Renee replied, smiling softly. "But I don't worry about it. Whatever comes, we'll face it, just like we always have." Tyler nodded, her words settling into his heart like a familiar melody. For the first time, he felt not just ready for the future, but excited for it, a future shaped by love, understanding, and the unshakable belief that even the smallest actions could create ripples of change. Crystal Bay's story was never just about a neighborhood, it was about the power of community, the strength found in unity, and the enduring impact of compassion. It was a testament to the idea that progress, while messy and imperfect, is always worth pursuing. And as its residents looked toward the future, they knew one thing for certain: their journey was far from over. Together, they would continue to build, to grow, and to inspire, leaving a legacy of hope for generations to come. If this story moved you, imagine the ripple effect we could create together. Crystal Bay's journey reminds us that change starts with a single step, a single voice, a single act of courage. Let's carry that lesson forward in our own lives and communities. If you believe in the power of unity and the strength of compassion, join us. Click that subscribe button to become part of a community that shares stories of hope, resilience, and transformation. Let's inspire each other to build a better future, one story at a time. And don't stop here, there's so much more to discover. Check out our other videos to explore tales that uplift, challenge, and encourage growth. Before you go, share your thoughts in the comments below. What's one small action you can take today to create a ripple of change in your world? Write something meaningful like, "I choose love and understanding to shape my world," or, "Together, we can build a brighter future." Your words matter. They have the power to inspire someone else to take their first step toward change. Thank you for watching, for listening, and for believing in the good we can create together. Until next time, stay hopeful, stay compassionate, and keep making waves.